Okay, thank you, Colleen. I just want to say good morning and welcome everyone. I'm so happy you're able to join us here today. So we're going to get started. This is, as Colleen mentioned, the third in our series of webinars on resiliency for public health professionals. We also invite other healthcare workers, first responders, first receivers, and also the general public who might be interested in the topic. There's a few main areas that we're going to cover today, basically about managing grief and loss during COVID-19. This is not what I would consider to be an introduction to grief and loss. Probably we're all familiar with that already. This is really going into specific about how we are managing grief and loss during this pandemic. It's going to cover information that we can use to help ourselves, but also helping each other, including our families during these very difficult times. And there'll be resources to share with you also for supporting families, for either you yourself personally or professionally with the families that you're working with. As we know, we're dealing with a very, very difficult time right now, and there's a lot of uncertainty that we're experiencing, both personally and professionally. And basically, if we define this time, it's very chaotic. It's also being referred to as a very traumatic experience. Anytime we have this type of shutdown in our daily activities, our outreach to others, our working with others, our ability to move around our communities, it creates a lot of uncertainty for us. And we are learning how we can change with all these difficulties and better meet our own needs and also our concerns for the public. As we begin today, what I'd like to do is something that I do with each of our webinars is I just want to begin with a little brief breathing exercise to kind of center us. I know we're coming in, we're on webinars, we're at home, we're on our computers, we're on our phones, trying to view this or trying to keep up with other activities. So I'm just going to ask you to just take a moment and just take in a deep breath. Just breathe in and breathe out. It helps sometimes to keep your feet firmly on the ground. If you sit back in your chair with your hands open, your hands resting in your lap with your palms open, it just kind of helps to keep our whole system open as we breathe in and breathe out. Just allow your body to find its natural rhythm of breathing. And this time as you breathe in, I want you to imagine you're breathing in all positive energy that's around you, the positive support that you have in your life, the love that you feel from others. Just kind of breathe that in. Keep breathing, breathe in, breathe out. And as you exhale, see if you can visualize exhaling any stressors you might be feeling, any worry or concern you currently have. Just imagine as if you exhale, it can leave your body. Take another deep breath. Breathe in that positive energy that's out there. Exhale. Breathe in. Okay, just relax. Okay, we're going to begin. I like to begin with this quote that we get from Vicki Harrison, who's a bereavement specialist. She reminds us that grief is like the ocean. It comes on waves, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes the water is calm and sometimes it is overwhelming. All we can do is learn to swim. I think for many of us, if we do know how to swim, right now we're just really kind of trudging water a little bit and just trying to keep ourselves afloat. And again, that's the best we can be doing sometimes. I hope no one is judging themselves harshly. The situation we're dealing with is something I repeat continually. Whatever reaction you're having, it's a very normal reaction to an abnormal situation. Pandemics, when they do occur, yes, they have occurred in the past, but it is a very abnormal situation to be living through. I'm going to begin with a video here. This comes from the American Psychological Association. It's just a 3-minute video. It really kind of focuses on some of the information I'm going to be expanding on in today's webinar. So let's begin. If you have any problem seeing or hearing the video, there is a link at the end, and we're also, Melanie is going to be sending out, and Colleen will be sending out a handout to you that has the links to the videos. I'm showing 2 videos, and I have a whole list of resources. So you'll be receiving that if you have any problem right now watching or hearing.
The COVID-19 pandemic is not only a medical crisis, but a psychological one. Along with the collective anxiety, stress, and sadness comes collective loss and sorrow. Loss can shake our senses of self. Many of us will have to cope with the loss of loved ones in the midst of this pandemic. Many are also grieving their sense of safety, of social connection, of financial security. Losing a job, not having a graduation ceremony, not being able to attend a funeral, all are losses to be grieved. What we are experiencing now is a living loss, and as we move forward, people will continue to experience losses we can't yet predict. Psychologists say that in addition to grieving what is now missing from our lives, we may also grieve for the ways in which those losses affect our senses of self and personal identity. If part of who you are is defined by social interactions, what does it mean for you when you are quarantined at home? It helps to name and claim our grief. People often have a vague sense of anxiety or suffering, but putting words to those losses can help them identify ways to move forward. Psychologists recommend journaling to help with this process. Since most of us have never been through anything like this, it can help to explore how you got through another challenging transition, like a divorce or losing your job. How did you heal and recover through that process? You can likely apply some of those strategies to this situation. Social connections are still important. Psychologists encourage people to stay connected with their social support networks through phone calls, text messages, video chat, and social media. For many people, it will take time to recover from their losses. Keep checking in on friends and family members even after this period of isolation ends. Grief is natural, and most people are resilient. Though grief is difficult, it helps to recognize that it's natural and serves a purpose. Grief can help people turn inward and adjust to a new way of life without the people, places, or things they have lost. Research suggests that once a crisis has passed, most people are able to bounce back and move forward with their lives. Know that while grieving, it's normal to fluctuate between moments of sadness and mourning and moments of acceptance or even happiness. It's also important to remember that grief is temporary. The difficult feelings will pass. For more information on how to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, visit APA's Pandemic Resource page.
Okay. For me, that video kind of captures some of the areas that I want to focus on. We are dealing with grief. Some of us have already been directly affected by the loss of a life, but there's also the other losses that we're experiencing. In addition to the loss of life that some of us may have experienced with a close friend or personal colleague or something like that. And again, this is a very abnormal situation, what we're currently seeing, okay? And we're seeing that as, again, we have a psychiatrist here who is reminding us that the pandemic has caused loss of everything we are familiar with, including our daily structure. For some jobs and social contacts, it has led to serious financial despair, illness, and death. So there's a lot of mourning and grief that is going on. I think we do need to, as it said in the video, to name it and to recognize it for what it is. It's a grief and it's a loss. It's not just a sadness and it's not just a despair and it's not just a frustration. We are losing certain parts of our existence. However, if we develop our resiliency, we'll be able to regroup as we're experiencing some of these losses. Grief is just part of a natural process of life and it requires time. And current situation is very disruptive to many of the activities and the rituals that we often follow. If you haven't seen our previous video that we did, the webinar on rituals, it might be very helpful at this time. We do know that we're experiencing this crisis with people that are becoming sick and are passing away. There's a lot of isolation that is occurring. And part of this isolation is also very frustrating. So if we're in a grieving process or if we're in an anticipatory state where we recognize a loved one is seriously ill, then we often do get to spend time with them. We're used to having hospital visitations and sitting with them at their bedside. Unfortunately, in many circumstances, that has actually been not available to us. I understand that there are going to be some considerations there. In some situations, family members may be able to have personal contact, but it's highly unlikely in most situations. So it increases and intensifies the feelings that we're having if we talk about the loss in the mourning in anticipation of someone who might be seriously ill. We also want to recognize what this cumulative grief effect has on our first line receivers. our medical professionals and healthcare providers are seeing an exorbitant, the number of deaths they are dealing with now is well beyond what any training or previous experiences have been in their professional life. So let's also honor and give respect to them, and also to offer our empathy for the efforts that they're doing. I'm going to talk at the very end. We have a wonderful video by Dr. Brene Brown on empathy, which I hope will be helpful. But again, the abnormality of the situation, again, the new normal is not normal, is that this sense of isolation actually can intensify some of our grief. In the video, it talked about using journaling. And journaling can be very, very helpful in getting some of our thoughts out and some of our feelings out, particularly when there's individuals that we may not have direct contact with. So writing a letter, reading a letter, acknowledging just some of your thoughts and feelings and writing them down and sharing them, whether you share them with the person directly or share them with someone that you feel comfortable with, can be very, very helpful at this time. You know, so many times in our culture here that we recognize that when we are in a period of grief or if we're anticipating a loss, we really do rely on our social support and our social connections. And currently with the pandemic, that's being diminished also. So we have to figure out new ways to, again, maintain some of the rituals that we have, but also that sense of connectiveness. I remind people all the time that even though we are referring to it as social distancing, what we really mean is physical distancing. So anyone that's experiencing a grief or a loss or whatever other emotional state they're having, just maintaining a social connection is very, very important. Everyone's going to grieve differently. There is really no one way to grieve or to mourn a loss. We each have our own reaction to it. Some of us have been conditioned to experience losses because of previous events that we've occurred, and that has helped us to know that we have gotten through it before. There's also the occurrence that sometimes when we hear discussions of grief or loss, it can bring up some memories of us of previous losses that we've had in our life. I always just want to pause here and remind individuals that are listening or watching that if anything that you're hearing today in this webinar or throughout this whole pandemic triggers any other strong emotional thoughts for you about previous griefs or losses that you have had, or any anxiety or fear about something that you might anticipate becoming as far as a loss, make sure you connect with somebody, keep your social support, and there's also professional help that's available if you do need it. And we'll be sharing that towards the end of the presentation. So one of the things that I feel is important, and many other who specialize in bereavement, is that learning how to express our grief is important. There's many different rituals that we often use to help us to rely on expressing our grief. And what we're dealing with now in COVID-19 is a lot of restrictions on some of the more traditional methods that we do have. But in each of those methods, we can learn from them what we do, which many times includes our visual sense, and there's other ways we can keep that connection, you know, telling stories, listening to music, creating art, memorials, doing something symbolically ritual, lighting a candle, can all be significant to help us connect to our grief and in a way to express it and share it. Our faith communities have actually been, I think, pretty resourceful in the ways that they are able to establish new ways of helping us to grieve, particularly when there is a death. And as I mentioned before, you know, we're seeing so many different changes that we're dealing with, and this is not normal for us. But our reactions is a very normal reaction to a very abnormal situation. While there are restrictions to how many people might come to a gravesite, and we see a priest here who is administering last rites through the window of a nursing home. The nurses were able to set up a phone, and you know, the family member, it was more for the comfort of the family members to know that a religious practice that was important to them was still being honored during this difficult time. Going back to the ways we might create a memorial that might help us in our grief and our loss, there are some simple ways that can be done. People are creating memorials and shrines in their home, just lighting candles, doing a ceremony of candle lighting with friends, telling a story, sharing stories. We also have, now that we're relying, because of the physical distancing, that we're using much more of the social medias that are out there. So there's a number of resources that we do have that can help us during this time. The important thing I remind others is that remember also that children are being affected and children can also be included in this process. These are some of the tools that are available online. I'm just sharing them with you as a source of information. I'm not highlighting any one particularly to be more beneficial than others. It's up to the individual. Remember, no, we all don't grieve the same way. So sharing things on a social media platform might seem unusual to some. There are some that are much more general open. There are some that are forums where people can have a discussion with each other as far as a group. There are other sites that you can just post a memorial as a remembrance of your loved one. More active, involved sites where other people can also share their thoughts and comments. It's up to the individuals and the families that are directly involved as to how they wish to share this in the online media. But the important thing is to know is that there are several different options available for you. And for many people, it is a substitution for what is normally part of our, whether we visit with a family during a time of grief, whether there's a wake or whether someone is sitting Shiva. There's different ways that we can still connect in keeping our physical distance. Another action that some people like to do as they memorialize someone is to create a living memorial. And definitely we can use nature to do this. I love this quote from the Arbor Day founder, J. Sterling Morton. "If you seek my monument, look around you." So planting something special in your yard or actually commemorating something at a park or even at a workplace might be a nice way to memorialize someone. There are some other options here, and I want to talk now specifically about helping children during these difficult times. So this comes from the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. I've included their hyperlink here so you can get a little bit more information. They have several different fact sheets that are available that kind of help you kind of bullet it. And I'm just kind of highlighting some of the information that they share here. These are some of the suggestions. This is not the complete list, but this is some of the highlighted ones that I want to acknowledge that in working with children and how to help them and remind them that it's okay, whatever their emotions are, be it happy, sad, angry, hurt, lonely, etc., to help them to understand, and that also that we all do get upset. Helping them to learn how to talk about their feelings and what's happening is also important. And again, the recommendation that we deal with children in an age appropriate, and age appropriate is based on whatever their developmental process is at, to help them to better understand what is going on. I do believe, and many times grief specialists will tell us, that it's important for children to do, that we do share some information with them that they can understand, okay? We also, because we're talking about losses, so the loss may not be a death, it may be the loss of the presence of having contact with a grandparent or with a parent or with a loved one or a neighbor. And we can remind children that people do get better also. We are seeing more people coming out of the hospital, so that can be reassuring to children also. We can't give them false hope or false promises, but we try to give them as much factual information that's age appropriate. Now, I have here another group called the National Alliance for Grieving Children. And they have a toolkit which is available both in English and Spanish. It's called Responding to Losses and Changes. You can actually get a free download of this book. It's about a 64-page booklet. You don't order it. Basically, you just download it on your computer and you can review it. If you have a printer, you can print it out. If you are able, this is just two examples of two of the worksheets that they have. I call them worksheets, but they're basically just little graphics that are helpful. They have little they do have an instruction section telling you how to use both of these pages. Here it is helping a child to identify what their fears are, and then what they know helps them to deal with some of their fears. This refers to a rainy day umbrella, that rain is a part of life, and there are things that happen when we're sad, and there are things that we can look forward to or anticipate as the rain starts to lift and change, and also the benefit of rain. So there's different ways we can kind of view this, and it can be something that can be very, give more meaning and understanding, or increase understanding, particularly in working with children, about how situations do change. It's not raining every day, it's raining right now is, I guess, one way we can express that. I want to go into some details for helping and working with first responders, first receivers, and essential workers. And what we know now is that many times in previous traumatic situations as crisis counselors, I was often dealing with first responders, but the whole infrastructure that we're dealing with in a pandemic is we not only want to consider our first responders, and of course we still want to consider them, but there's so many others, line staff workers, grocery store clerks, transportation workers, who are all part of that whole infrastructure. They're now being either first receivers, first responders, or essential services. So each of them have different concerns. So there are a few groups that are set up specifically for first responders. We have the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. They've been in existence since 1984. There's a National Museum and Monument in Washington, D.C. that you can visit. They also do Police Week, which is a group, they get together, law enforcement officers and their families and loved ones, to honor officers who died in the previous year, particularly in line of duty deaths. However, they do have a online light a virtual candle where you can create a memorial, or you can also, if it's not a family member or someone that you're close with, there might be someone in your community that you heard of, an officer that has lost their life to COVID-19. Or any other line of duty death, and you can go to the website and you can put in their name, and there's probably going to be a picture of them and some honorary tributes to them, which you can add your comments. And of course, you can also make donations, which goes to the family fund. There is something similar for our fallen fighter fighters. The National Fallen Fighter Fighters Foundation also they have a memorial that people can visit right now. You can do a lot more available virtually, and also finding out how you might support families of fallen firefighters. So it's called firehero.org. Now, for children of first responders, I think there's an additional stress factors that comes up for them, both for the parents and also for the children. And when I talk about the first responders, I'm also talking about the first receivers. Many of our healthcare professionals, our public health professionals, are spending time out of the house. Children are aware that they're not allowed to leave the house, and yet they're seeing mom, dad, or grandma, or aunt, or uncle, or neighbor leaving the house, and that might bring up some additional concern for them. So we want to make sure children understand that we as healthcare professionals and line staff are trained to deal with this crisis situation, and we know how to take care of ourselves, and we're doing everything we can, okay? We can also stay in touch with them, and we'll see them at a time, but we're also going to have to explain the work that we're doing is also about caring for others. And that's part of the choice in the careers that we have, and we're there to help them, and there are others that are there helping us with helping them in our absence. So it's kind of part of that cycle of life, helping people, and particularly young children, to recognize that they're not going to be totally alone. There are people that are there helping them, particularly if a parent or family member is out of the house attending to their professional duties. Now, there are times that we do know that probably the illness is more serious. It's anticipation the person might not be going to be able to pull through that. So we want to do, again, use appropriate language to explain to the child that are age appropriate, what they can do, what's going on, okay? If the child is experiencing a loss for a parent or a family member, let them know that even though they're not able to visit with the family member, there are healthcare workers that are there to make sure the person is not alone, and they're doing everything they can. And that there are ways that people can send messages remotely. I think that's really important. The other important thing is that children also, even during this difficult time, do need to have a rather consistent routine. That's not to say there can't be little breaches in the routine that might be beneficial, occasionally maybe staying up a little bit later, spending a little bit more time playing a video game. That's normal. We all look for little escapes sometimes, but the basic routines of, bedtime and schoolwork and meals and everything else, and even attending to household errands and chores is really important for a child to see that life continues on and we have to keep our consistent efforts going forward. Okay, but maintaining any kind of contact that's appropriate as far as using social media, phone calls, and things like that can be very, very helpful. And then sometimes we need to find other activities to actually serve as a helpful distraction. So an individual, particularly children, are not overwhelmed by their sadness. So engaging them in certain physical activities or hobbies can be very, very helpful at this time. There's another side of the situation that we're dealing with now is also that for many of us, we are seeing the death of coworkers or anticipating concern about the loss and death of a coworker. And if you have experienced that already, or if you're anticipating that occurring, there are some suggestions in working with the death of a coworker. Again, slightly different than a loved one or a family member or a relative, but it is a significant relationship. Now, in that relationship with a coworker, not all coworkers have an equal relationship of concern. So there might be some individuals at work that are a little bit more directly affected. Others might have a sense of sadness, but they might not feel as directly connected. So you want to respect the differences that each of us may have when we hear the loss of a coworker. Also, you want to respect your coworker's privacy. There are some individuals who may choose not to discuss, and there may be some families that choose not to discuss details of a coworker's death with extensive details with the workplace environment. But as far as how we share and interact with each other, sometimes just remembering that it's just good to be there as a listener. You don't have any responsibility to try to fix the person or fix your coworkers, but just let them know that if they do have something they want to share or talk about, you are available. When we talk about talking about it, okay, again, just a reminder not to assume that everyone's going to process the leave and the loss the same way. Some may want to talk, some may not want to talk. Don't be afraid to ask a coworker how they're feeling and ask them if they would like to talk, but also you can ask them if this is a time to talk, because somebody might be in the middle of actually doing a work project. Even though they're working at home, they're working online. We don't know what's happening in their home environment as far as them managing the household. So they might not be in a place where they really want to open up vulnerably and talk about the death that just occurred among a coworker. So just having that mutual support for each other, but also having the mutual respect of time and place of when some of these conversations are set up. And there are also times that groups do organize, and a workplace might organize together to do a simple just remembrance for a coworker. Okay. So speaking with your coworkers about the way to formally and informally grieve together is helpful. No one should be forced to participate. However, people should be welcome to share or to be there for an online support or for any other type of support. And also some might benefit from contacting their employee assistance professional. EAPs can be very, very helpful to deal with workplace issues, including grief and losses that occur with an EAP. That can also be for any stress or the other losses, not the loss of life, but the other losses we're experiencing during the pandemic. EAPs can also be very beneficial about anything that pertains to our work life and or our personal life. The important thing to remember is to just give yourself permission. Okay. You want to make sure that you take time to engage in stress reducing activities, getting the support you need, and also getting enough sleep. When we talk about getting sleep, we're also talking about getting enough exercise, nutrition, just balancing. We've talked about that in other webinars, just learning and remembering to maintain that balance so we can maintain our resiliency. When we experience a loss, that's a time when we need to use the skills that we have developed in our resiliency, so they're there for us to rely on. We're going to be closing soon. I just want to add another video. This is from a Dr. Brene Brown, and she talks about empathy and how to give support. And in this brief video, she's explaining the difference between offering empathy and offering sympathy. There's nothing wrong with sympathy, but sometimes when we hear of the loss or someone else experiencing a loss, we become at a loss for words. And I think this is a nice video to just kind of capture how we can express to others.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy: perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth, staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do, recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
I apologize if the sound for that wasn't in sync with the video clip. We tested it several different times. It might have had a different viewing this time. But anyway, you do have the link to the video. If you're not familiar with Dr. Brene Brown, wonderful, wonderful, compassionate clinician. And I was happy that I was able to introduce this to you. Please, you can look for her online, or you can just kind of follow the clip. Okay, there's other ways that we can virtually make a connection with people. And again, these are just several different resources that we have worked to identify for you that can give you some information or ways to hold virtual funerals, virtual memorials. There's a lot of online support that is available. There's always been online support, but many times people didn't feel the need to be online with their grief. They chose to probably grieve with a more direct fashion with loved ones and friends or family, and unfortunately we're not able to have that kind of social interaction. So the online support is actually very, very beneficial. There's some particularly for the community, for grieving children, for grieving parents, for women who have lost a loved one, and also for widows and widowers. A few more grief supports, and again, we're going to be sending you a handout to make sure you have all these listings for you. You don't have to be writing them down now. We're trying to keep notes. We're going to share that information with you. I remind people that in working with children, I know we have many people from CLEF that are on here today, that the Sesame Street has created, now there's of course many wonderful episodes of Sesame Street. I just want to highlight that they also created a specific website for dealing with COVID-19. So they have resources particularly available in helping children and families dealing with COVID-19, including grief and losses. So you can go to their sesamestreet.org/caring. Their program for COVID-19 is called Caring for Each Other. It's a great resource to have. The resources we have here, we have some New Jersey specific resources. We have the mental health care line, which is available every day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. A trained clinician will answer the phone, will talk to you. We'll also ask a few questions, and if you would like to be contacted by a mental health clinician, they will arrange to have someone call you back with permission, and they will actually offer you some phone consultations, some mental health sessions done online. I believe they're offering about I think it's 6 or 8 sessions actually. And then if needed, if that doesn't help, if you need a little bit more help, they'll also make recommendations for some ongoing professional help if that's something that you need. You can call if you just have some general anxiety questions or depression or sadness, or you just want to get through the day and you just want to talk to a trained counselor. You can use them. You don't have to be calling them only to get a referral for anything longer than a phone counseling session. Services are also available similar for the deaf and the hard of hearing community. So there's a special line that is set up for them to have access to services. Their services are offered from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Another reminder is that we do have a concern that there might be an increase in suicide. So we have the National Suicide Prevention Line. Again, you'll be talking to trained clinicians. New Jersey also has their own individual suicide prevention hope line. And you can also go to the website and get information. You can text them or you can call them. And that's more information for you to have to hold on to. When you're calling a helpline, some individuals prefer to speak to more of an individual that identifies as a peer to them. So we have programs that are set up by, again, trained counselors who are also either working as veterans, the Cop to Cop, the Trevor line for LGBT individuals, the Mom to Mom helpline, and New Jersey Connect, which is for individuals in recovery from substance abuse and or mental health disorders. And then we have the general New Jersey COVID-19 information hub. If you have a general question, you can dial 211, and that line is available 24/7. Or if you have a medical question, sometimes our anxiety is related to an uncertainty around some of the medical concerns that we have. So you can call and ask about physical medical questions by calling their helpline also, which is the 800-962-1253. Okay, well, that's the information we're sharing with you right now. And again, we'll be sending you some resources. I just want to close with giving a thank you to everyone who participates today, and also everyone who is a receiver, a responder, someone who is protecting or helping with childcare or providing childcare services in their home or in a group home setting. To everyone who is essential service, to everyone that is working together as a community, I want to offer a thank you. Without being a cliche, I do remind people, this too shall pass. We will get through this. We need to sometimes also remember in our resiliency, the sources and the places of comfort that we have. This is a particular picture of a sun. I always like taking pictures of sunrises and sunsets. I'm more prone to sunsets because I'm not an early morning person, but this is off the Amalfi Coast of Italy. This is overlooking I think it's the Isle of Capri, to be honest with you. But anyway, it's just to me, it's just a nice, peaceful picture to look at. And whatever we can do, be it through music, through visual, through art, through talking, through sharing, to keep a connection to our own resilience is very, very important. But again, I just want to honor a thank you for you here participating. If this is helpful, please share it with others. If you're a responder, receiver, essential service director, involved person, then please thank you also. That is my contact information. And I'm going to turn it back to Colleen now.
Phil, we just want to thank you so much. That was as wonderful as the 2 prior webinars, and we really appreciate the time and thought and effort that you put into creating this 3-part series. So thank you again, and there are many thank yous coming up in our chat box. I just want to remind everyone that today's webinar, as well as the 2 prior, are available at the Rutgers Training YouTube channel. So that's youtube.com/Rutgers Training, and those links will be included in the evaluation. Also, the links to all of the resources you shared today were included with the last reminder that went out for the webinar. We can also send it again as well for those who may have missed that. So thank you again, Phil, and thank you everyone. For
yes, I just want to say thank you also, Colleen and Melanie. I also, for everyone that was chatting, it's hard for me to read the chat windows and keep the presentation going, but I'm definitely going to be looking at some of your comments. I appreciate all the positive feedback. And also, if there's anything else I can help you with, then please feel free to contact us and we'll be happy to do that. Okay? Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.